What's up, brother?
What's
What?
up?
Oh
Can you hear
shoot!
me?
I can hear you perfectly, bro. Can you hear me all
Okay.
right?
Yep, I can hear you perfectly. And
Perfect.
it says it's recording. So this is my first time doing a Zoom meeting. So I hope everything is going on fine. All right. So, like when we talk about like martial artists, MMA fighters, and UFC fighters, like we are talking about a rare breed of human beings who can make it up to that level.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, what does it take to be the top of the heap? Like, becoming a UFC fighter. Like, irrespective of how many wins you have, how what's your record, it doesn't matter. If
Yeah.
somebody has to make it to the UFC, he has to be a special human being. So, tell me about yourself and how did mixed martial arts happen to you?
You definitely have to be a special human being. I think to be good in this sport, you have to have a couple screws loose. But what I said, to go to that top of the heap, you got to have those screws loose, but also be a very motivated human being. So I kind of fell into the sport myself. I was a little bit crazy, high strung, very responsive to stressful situations. So I think I was drawn to the sport just on a primitive level because of the fear and the adrenaline and the things that go with it drove me to lean into that pain and suffering a little bit. So MMA has been one of the greatest educators of my life. I compare it to my college education, my wrestling education, all great experiences, but nothing taught me more about life and dealing with adversity other than fighting the fight game and mixed martial arts. It's a beautiful thing.
So you have a very good solid base in wrestling. So when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to wrestling, like it also involves a lot of toughness and physicality more than just the technique. Because the wrestlers, they like to talk shit about jiu-jitsu guys and say that they are lazy and they are not tough. They like to just lay on their back and wait for some like crazy thing to happen and then lock in something.
Yeah.
But when it comes to wrestling, you guys are very tough because you keep chaining things and you never stop. So is that something that makes you extremely ready for an extreme competition like mixed martial arts? So is that a very good base for? Of course, I know it's a very good base, but since you have been very successful in wrestling, I think you're like a college champion.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, did that give you a very solid base for MMA?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think anybody that can suffer in a wrestling room and achieve there is going to be they're going to have that will and those loose screws. They're going to be able to, endure suffering and pain and long hours in the gym. So yeah, that's a foundation. I think there's few sports like it. Like I love jujitsu. I don't think, not as many people in my circle poo-poo under jujitsu, but I love the jujitsu side. But I think wrestling, just people that wrestle and, go competitively against other human beings to see who's going to submit and give up first is a great background for the sport.
So, what is it for a wrestler to learn striking and try to become a complete martial artist? So, how did that transition happen?
Yeah, it's a difficult transition for me. I kind of leaned too much into the striking, so it's always it's finding that even balance. So as I got my body started to fall apart and I wrestled less, I really embraced the striking and tried to, almost primarily strike, especially my last like 3, 4 fights. But you got to find that happy marriage between most of them. If you're a career and a lifetime wrestler, transitioning to the striking can be a harder ball game. And I think some people transition, too aggressively to just strike, and there's also the other side of the spectrum where people just rely on the wrestling and stay there, like the Ben Askrens. But he's
Hmm.
achieved a very high level, so there's something to be said about
Hmm.
both sides.
So, how did like the idea of turning into mixed martial artists come up in your mind? Because like not many, very many people, even I know of certain people who
Mm-hmm.
are extremely good at striking or extremely good at jiu-jitsu, but when asked about like their interest in competing in mixed martial arts, they're like, I don't want to try that sport. That sport is crazy. I don't want to get hit in the head, or I don't want to have concussions, damage. So I mean, like, how did that idea come up in your mind to like transition into a completely another level of a sport, which is mixed martial arts?
Yeah, no. So when I graduated from college, was a wrestler. I had a kid at the time, so I was working, a 9 to 5, more hours than that, but a sales job, which kind of, you know, built that aggression. So I started doing a little jujitsu and was good at that. And then people say, hey, maybe you should take a fight. I said, okay, I took it, and I was, you know, relatively good at it right out the gates. So I saw a career path that would let me raise my kid, spend time with my kid, and make ends meet. So it was easy for me. I always loved fighting. I love the competition. I love having to conquer your own fears and things that were going on. And if I could marry that with being able to raise my kid and spend time with my son, it was an easy deal for me. And I didn't expect to receive the education that I did going through the whole process of the ups and downs and what it takes to be competitive.
I think you did. I think a course in marketing. I think that's what is your education in.
Yeah.
So,
I have a degree in marketing.
So when talking about competing in mixed martial arts, because like it's a very new sport in India, because like it's still booming. It's not up to the level it is in United States. So there are many good young athletes that are looking up to people in the United States for motivation, because you are the point of reference for us. So what would you advise young and aspiring people, because some people, they don't have no idea about, MMA, they just watch UFC and think that, oh, the sport looks dope, I just want to try that. But in reality, things are different. So what does it exactly take to become an MMA fighter, and what are the kind of people that should stop themselves from trying mixed martial arts? Because some people think they are ready, but they are not. So how do you evaluate yourself and be sure that it is the sport for you?
The only way to do it is to be thrown in the deep waters, you know. So the best way for these kids to get there is to get an education, is to learn the striking, the wrestling, the grappling. And what you see, like we have set up our gym, is we have it, you know, two sides. You learn your striking. So what are you doing on your stand-up, whether it's kickboxing, Muay Thai, straight boxing? You got to have a solid stand-up base, and then you got to get the ground game, the wrestling, the submission wrestling, jiu-jitsu. You need to understand both of those sides. So just like any aspect of life, and education is the most important thing you can receive. So people that, you know, everybody thinks we have this innate ability to go fight. We were born with this ability, and it's just not true, especially at the highest level. So you need to educate yourself. You need to learn the arts of striking. You need to learn the arts of the ground game, and then you need to spar and see if it's for you. So before you decide, I want to be a UFC fighter, I want to do this, you need to develop the skills, the defenses, the attacks, and then you need to experience it. You need to be thrown in the deep end. You need to get some spar rounds in, take some shots, and see if this is truly the sport for you. But that education and that journey along the way will be the greatest benefit of your life, regardless of whether you step in the octagon or what you do from there. Getting that fight education, building that mastery of your body, and that confidence that comes with it is priceless.
Yes, you're talking about the human body awareness and the solid fundamentals that everyone has to know, because some people, they learn some fancy moves and think that, oh, I can't pull it off. But it's not true, because you have to be solid both in striking as well as jiu-jitsu, which which is a very great point. So when it comes to physicality, like we talked about all these techniques and the education needed for becoming a successful mixed martial artist, because this is a very highly competitive sport where people try to rip other people's head off for either money or competition, like medals. So it's very unforgiving. So apart from the technique, what do you think is extremely needed in terms of physicality? Because people like me, I have a good name in my gym as a very technical guy, but I still struggle with bigger people because I'm an extremely small guy. I know, I hope you remember me when you met me. I'm like a very puny guy. I'm a very puny guy. I barely make 125 pounds. So I can't even cut down to 125 pounds. That's my walk around weight. So for people like me, so how much is physicality involved in the success for mixed martial arts?
It's huge. It's right up there next to the education. You got to keep your body healthy, and you got to know how to build that strength. And that's part of the reason they make weight classes, but the building your body and gaining that strength is hugely important. It's one of the things I've seen all throughout my career, is the fact that I didn't necessarily take care of my body. 20 years ago, I had a back surgery. They told me to stop wrestling. I kept going. But it's the recovery from those injuries and the hardening of your body, which comes through the gym, and that education on the weight side as well. Now you need to lift heavy weights, but you need to learn how to, have your kinetic chain head to toe, make sure your body's functioning appropriately so you can be as strong as possible. So along the lines of your jiu-jitsu and your stand-up, you got to develop that physical strength as well, which whether it's through weight training, body weight, whatever it is, there's many different ways to attack that. That's a conversation for another day, but you have to build that physicality and that physical strength.
Yes, because this question that I asked is extremely important in terms of martial arts, because there is a myth, or I would say a big confusion, because some people think, martial arts is, like doesn't need strength because it's meant for the small guy to beat up the bigger guy. But in reality, we do need strength, because that is something that I have been and am experiencing right now. Because though I have good technique, I'm barely able to survive against like extremely strong and explosive guys. But had I been like like 185 pounds, it would have been a completely different story for the technique I have. So like you said, of course, like strength matters. So, but can you just give me like what is the percentage that physicality, like some people say it's like 65% technique and 35%. So do you think that is how it works? Like because like people should know how much emphasis they should put in like all this strength training, all this agility training, to just take care of their physicality and make them physically ready for MMA.
Yeah, I think you have to be compassionate with your body, dude. Everybody comes in a different package. So to be a 120-pound man and think that you're going to fight the Brock Lesnar's of the world and defend yourself is not realistic. But as far as, the average civilian learning that technique and be able to defend themselves against a larger opponent, I absolutely think that's possible. So if I were talking to an up-and-coming martial artist, I would make the strength training about 20-30% of their focus, make it a smaller focus. You want to be strong, you want to make sure your body can function throughout your career, but your primary focus needs to come on the education of the arts, whether it's stand-up or ground. I'd like to see a balance between both of them depending on each individual, but it's very individualized as far as the response that I give to that situation. The best response I would say to anybody is you got to be compassionate with yourself and grow the skill set from where you're sitting. So a smaller guy like you, focus on the technique, focus on beating smaller guys up. That's why we have weight classes, and don't worry about trying to be, a heavyweight and smash all the heavyweights. That's just not who you were born on this earth to be. It's not realistic. Yeah. So focus on the technique, focus on keeping your body healthy and doing what you can within your means, but also, understand who you are and what skill sets you were born with.
Perfect. And talking about you, like initially you were you started your career as a heavyweight and then went down to light heavyweight and then to middleweight. So like what is your walk around weight, and what do you think is the difference scientifically between all these three weight categories? Because I know there is a huge difference between heavyweight and light heavyweight itself, because they just seem to be like just one step ahead, like one step, like above and below, but it's a huge difference. So to fight in all these three categories, it would have taught you a lot of things. So you would be the best guy to ask this question to. And what do you think is the biggest difference in terms of preparing for a heavyweight fight and a light heavyweight fight, and if possible for like a middleweight fight?
Man, that's a lot of questions rolled up in one. We can go all day on just that topic. But I was usually around like 235 when I was even fighting the heavyweights. I just couldn't find anybody early on to fight at 205. So I took whatever fights that I could get. As far as the differences in weight class, there's a great deal. The big guys are obviously going to be bigger or stronger, but they're also going to be a little bit slower. And for the most part, less technical. Because like you said, a lot of those guys have focused on, let's get strong and big, instead of let's develop a very precise technique to assassinate my opponent. So I would say from 185, they're going to be a lot lighter on their feet. They're going to be a little technically focused. Up to that heavyweight, they're usually going to be a little bit slower, a little bit stronger, but they're not going to move quite the same and probably be as technically efficient at that weight class. So you got to worry about people being stronger, scarier. They're going to be a little bit slower, but as you drop the weight classes, you're going to get people that are surgical, a little better skill, a little higher level skill set, I would say, and lighter on their feet.
Yeah, so, of course. Yeah. Of course, like this question is kind of vague, as you said, because it's a very huge topic in itself. But what I wanted to ask you was, because when it comes to heavyweight, there's a lot of things that happens, which is like kind of what? Because like in off late, like people like Maurice Green and the fight between Maurice Green and Jean Belonte. If you see that he got an arm triangle from the bottom from a very unorthodox position, and that's and also people like Alexei Olenek, they get a lot of submissions from very unorthodox and weird positions. Is that something that attributes to the strength that the heavyweights have? Because nothing like that happens in middleweight or like even in light heavyweight, but when it comes to heavyweight, some certain magic happens, and you know, a lot of knockouts like Mark Hunt, he just KO'd Frank Mir, and just he was walking like, you know, as if nothing has happened. So do you think that, you know, the heavyweight is something that that is like extremely, you know, powerful, and the level of squeeze is like nothing like you know, the other weight classes? That's what I meant to ask you.
Yeah, no, and the submission side, I mean, they got bigger limbs too, so it's a little easier to get a choke on someone with big, thick arms, especially if you get them locked up. I think the biggest thing is a lot of those big guys aren't necessarily used to being in a lot of those positions with other big guys. Like I know top level heavyweight professionals, it's kind of hard to find opponents that are as skilled as the people that they're fighting. So maybe sometimes they're not necessarily being put in those positions in the gym. And I also think there's obviously a strength category, especially when it comes to the stand-up. If you've got a 275-pound man that's spending his life in a weight room, he's going to be a little bit more effective with his striking than a 120-pound man like yourself. You're just able to generate, you know, a little bit more force.
Exactly. And so when it comes to the kind of fighter, being the kind of fighter that is supposed to be successful in MMA, do you think being a specialist helps you better than being an all-rounder? Or, you know, like you believe in like being extremely good at one particular thing, like Anderson Silva or Damian Maya? Or it's like it's always good to be like you know, a Robert Whittaker or like this Peter Yan, where like they are comfortable with almost every aspect of mixed martial arts. So what is your take on it?
I think you got to be versed in all aspects. I mean, you even use Anderson Silva for an example. Like he's a strikeout king. He's also a black belt on the ground. So even some of these names that you think are, you know, exceptional in one area are actually very skilled in another as well. So I think as you approach, if you're going to be a mixed martial artist, you got to develop both skills. You have your core, your base. Like I should have stuck with a wrestling more than I did. And that was one of the lessons I've learned, but my body would not cooperate where I can train and do the things that I needed to do. So I had to transition. So to be the best mixed martial artist you can be, you need to realize what are your weaknesses, what are your strengths, and how do I want to address my trading accordingly. If my submission wrestling is so bad that I'm getting choked out in fights, you obviously need to spend more time on the ground and learn those basic fences and situations. If I'm getting knocked out or I can't have any stand-up, you have to spend more time there. So you have to make a bare minimum as far as your skill set, so you're not getting punked on either side. But like I said, that's going to be another thing that's going to vary on an individual basis. Where are my weaknesses? What am I finishing fights with? Where do I want to spend my time training?
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to wrestling, you know, wrestlers immediately fall in love with jiu-jitsu, and they pick up jiu-jitsu unlike anybody else. This is from my own experience. So
Yeah.
how was the transition from wrestling to jiu-jitsu? Because wrestling itself is a very solid base in grappling, and
Yeah.
but jiu-jitsu is a completely polar opposite discipline, which doesn't use a lot of strength and conditioning, but it uses a good defense and waits for the proper opening to present itself, and then boom, you catch whatever is available. Whereas in wrestling, you dictate the pace, you dictate what you want to achieve, like either a double leg or you know, whatever technique. So how was that adaptation to the new philosophy was like for you?
Yeah, for me, it was easy, dude. I was always more of a ground wrestler when I did it. And part of that was because I had a bad back and surgery. So it hurt to take the shots and be on a stand-up. So if I can get somebody on the mat, on the ground, it was lovely. I love keeping people on the ground. So for me, it was an easier transition to the jiu-jitsu than it was to do wrestling. So I loved that transition. A lot of times I was able to get away from the stand-up game and not cause that stress on the areas of the body that were bothering me. So the transition for me was super easy. You want to put me on my back? Come here, come in so I can get my big mitts on you and bring you in for a snuggle and choke you unconscious. But for me, it was an easy transition. I think for a lot of wrestlers, if they keep an open mind when they're transitioning over, get comfortable playing on their back, it can be an easy transition for them to do.
So I mean, you would just say like your jiu-jitsu is always like the top game, because like it's very uncomfortable for you to be on your back and play the Hickson Gracie game. So you are more of a top guy. So because even your submissions, the submissions that you had say so, because like it was more of either a Kimura or a guillotine or a north south, which can only be applied from the top position. So were you always the guy that likes to like put pressure on people and like grind them and then tire them out and then go for a submission, or were you like the Marcelo Garcia kind of technical guy who waits for the opportunity and boom, like
I take whatever they can give me. In fact, my favorite spot in jiu-jitsu is the bottom. Like, I'm gonna start all my goes on the bottom, let people get on me. You want to start in the mount. The reason most fights was in there, even if I ended up on the bottom, I would reverse it and use that pressure to put that, to put that pressure on them, use that wrestler pressure. So you've seen a big transition in jiu-jitsu. There's a much more aggressive style with the influence of wrestlers. So back in the day when it was, the Marcelo Garcias and the early practitioners of this sport, you would see more dedicated, like traditional BJJ. What you're seeing is a meld of that traditional BJJ with some wrestlers and a different aggression. Because back in the day, it was a little bit easier to get those wrestlers that weren't versed in basic submissions and submission defenses. It was easier to submit them. But now that you've got these high-level athletes, these wrestlers that are a little bit more aggressive, transitioning and learning those base defenses and how to manipulate bodies, you're seeing a higher level of success. And I think you're seeing a more aggressive style of jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm. So initially people used to say like jiu-jitsu is everything that you need to survive on the streets or in the MMA, but now the things have changed because like everybody knows everything now. People have to be at least knowledgeable at the basic level in every aspect of MMA. So but when it comes to street fighting or real life survival fighting, how different is it from MMA? Or do you think you are safe enough on the streets just because you're like a top level fighter in the world?
Oh man, a lot of questions together. So am I safe on the streets? I mean, absolutely, dude. It's a big difference in a small percentage of people that can get into a cage and fight you. You're getting the best across the world. So you're fairly safe. I mean, the gun's a great equalizer, but I think the situational awareness of understanding what situations you're in and what's going on are going to be your best defenses in this world. That confidence that you get through the MMA and the confidence that I exude when I walk down the street is going to make people less likely to mess with you or cause a problem or try to steal my lunch money.
Oh yeah. No, what I meant was like when it comes to street fighting, there's a lot of things that you cannot do inside the cage, like stomping on the head, kicking the groin, like eye jabs, or like jumping from behind and all those stuff. So you think just MMA training is good enough to like high level MMA training is good enough to like defend you on the streets, or is it like you need to know all this Krav Maga and all these things which are street specific?
Yeah, no, I think that the best defense you can have is a quality MMA defense. There's some benefits of Krav Maga. Like I'll fish hook a dude, I'll headbutt a dude. I'll stick a thumb in somebody's eye if it's there, if it's a street fight. But it's not going to be the most effective. If I get in a fight with some dude and he's trying to claw my eyes and do that dumb shit, you get in a good stance and throw a couple of kicks or punches to his face, he's going to get knocked out. So there's a benefit, I think, to having that knowledge. But for the most part, there's no better defense, especially if it's a one-on-one fight, than having traditional MMA training. The rest of the shit, like if you try to gouge my eyes, you're just probably going to piss me off unless you're a highly skilled fighter, and then I'm going to smash you. So yeah. There's some benefits, but the best background you can have is that submission wrestling, the jiu-jitsu combined with the kickboxing, Muay Thai, and competitive stand-up arts. Like Taekwondo, karate, great for building that muscle memory, proprioception. But I want people to know how to shell up, do a high level of damage, and just try to eye gouge or do high level Krav Maga stuff. I don't think it's nearly as effective. Do I want people to train it? Cool. If you love training that's your thing, do it. But is it as effective? If I get a high level Krav Maga guy versus a dude that's versed in MMA, both to stand up in the ground, I'm going to take the MMA guy 10 out of 10 times.
Yes. Because you mean to say, because MMA provides a good base in terms of human body awareness and control and the body mechanics. Yeah, unlike Krav Maga, which is extremely oriented towards like, which is the weak spot, and like just we can strike, in the eyes, on the groin, instead of like giving a wholesome view of the human body mechanics and, try to be safe in every way, shape or form. So is that what you mean? Like when it comes to the high level training that the the mixed martial arts world provides you?
Yeah, that's fairly accurate. I think Krav Maga's their biggest benefit is just the aggression. Oh, can you hear me all right? Kind of
Yeah,
losing
yeah,
connection.
yeah. I can, I
No,
can.
the Krav Maga, that's straight aggression, I think is the most effective thing, which is going to work on most civilians on the street. But when you run into somebody that knows how to defend themselves and knows basic MMA techniques, that Maga shit's going to go out the window. It's not going to be nearly as effective as people think. But is it going to be effective 9 out of 10 times against a civilian that doesn't know what they're doing? Sure, that aggression and just eye gouging and tactics that they teach is going to be probably what people need and is going to be good just to show that aggression. But if you run into that person that actually knows how to defend themselves, it's probably not going to do much more than piss them off and make them really want to smash you. So it's, like I said, this is another case-to-case basis thing. But the
Yeah,
best background you
exactly.
can have is that MMA over the Krav Maga.
MMA. Perfect. So, I mean, like I have asked you this question before, but like what I want to know from you is to become a UFC fighter is not that easy because it puts I mean it takes a lot from you, like in terms of training, in terms of the mental preparation, in terms of a good mindset, good physicality, good technique. Everything has to come in unison to achieve that kind of a high level state in the competition. So how did you, because you told you were like a wrestler who did some who did some 9 to 5 job, and then transitioning to MMA and then getting to the UFC level is something that is very extremely motivating and inspiring for a normal man. So for
Yeah.
people like me to draw inspiration from, so how, I mean, like in a nutshell, can you describe how your path was to that level from just knowing, oh, there's something called mixed martial arts?
Yeah, no, I mean, the biggest thing is just having a belief in yourself and taking one step at a time, not necessarily having to visualize like UFC. I think it's a very good idea to visualize yourself and seeing you there at that top level. It is something you're truly interested in. But that day-to-day grind of just putting in time in the gym, taking one fight at a time and doing your best is really how you're going to get there. So I transitioned from a dude that just started doing jiu-jitsu because he enjoyed it, found that I was good at it, and then just kind of followed one step after another. That led from, taking the local fights up to taking the Strikeforce Challenger fights to being contracted to the UFC. So I think you got to have that belief in yourself, but you also, like I said, the biggest thing for me is be compassionate with where you're at right now and know you're going to have to plug in and take your time to go through the different stages, to take your couple of amateur fights, to get those local professionals, to start build your fan base, and then to start to go to those bigger shows and still see success. So as far as my path, my kid was my motivation. I had the
Oh yeah.
time to do it. So I just really immersed myself in the gym and what I needed to do.
Okay. So as a fighter, as an aspiring fighter, what should people be aware of, or what should people be ready for when it comes to reality? Because like it's not just like a movie where you just punch the shit out of people, but you also get
Yeah.
hit and there's a lot of damage and there's a lot of sorrow in the lives of martial artists in terms they have a lot of injuries, like untold injuries. So what are the things that we need to be ready for? Because in India, people don't have a realistic idea of what's going on in terms of the high level mixed martial arts competition. So being a guy that has reached the top of the sport, so what would you give as a solid advice to young aspirants?
Man, just get in there and plug in. Put your time in the gym. Show up is the best thing you can do. So before you do the sport, you think like, I want to aspire to be this UFC champion. Go to the gym, see where you stand, see what kind of skill sets you have, and start to develop those. If you try to do it with no foundation, if I didn't have wrestling and not understanding how to throw bodies around for the majority of my life, the sport would have been much more difficult. Now, for these dudes to want to do that without ever training it, you got to just plug in and build a skill set. So you got to find instructors that motivate you and have quality technique. That's the biggest difference. Are you in a room and are you in a place that has the knowledge that's going to set you up for success in the sport? So stop worrying about, hey, I want to be at the top of this game and what's going to happen, and just plug in, put the time in the gym and build the skill. If you're getting injured all the time, you're sparring too hard. If you're getting out there and you're not doing it right, you didn't build the appropriate foundation. So these dudes, they need to plug in, get the jiu-jitsu foundation, get the striking foundation, and don't worry so much about the sparring. Get there and build the knowledge. You can't go spar if you don't know how to block the basic defense. If I don't know how to parry a jab, I don't want you boxing sparring. There's no reason for you to go out and execute inappropriate technique. So for the aspiring athlete athletes out there, shut up, stop saying you want to be in the UFC. That's great. Have that in your mind, but I want you to put 5-6 years in on the striking and the ground before you worry about anything. The sooner you get into it, the younger you can do it, great. That makes sense. So don't expect to be at the top of the game, but you are going to get your ass kicked up to start. Get in there, plug in, be a student of the sport so you can learn as you go along.
So you mean to say, like, don't be result oriented, just be process oriented and just enjoy the process, and you will get to that level like eventually. So when it comes to the cardio, because there are very good athletes who excel in other sports like marathon and all those stuff, but when it comes to mixed martial arts, they really go out of gas, because it's something that is psychologically demanding, so you tend to like burn out yourself more than what you usually do. So how do you develop cardio for mixed martial arts? Do you keep doing that again and again to like develop a realistic cardio for the sport in specific?
Yeah, again, that's an individual basis. Like I said, I've probably overtrained a lot in my life, and my cardio has been less because of the way that I train. So a lot of it's going to come to the psychology of the fighter, their autonomic nervous system. Are they more sympathetic dominant? Are they kind of crazy? Because what you're going to see, most fighters that get into this shit have lived crazy lives. So they're a little bit more on the sympathetic, gas pedal, overstimulated side. So if you come into a fight and I'm overstimulated, I have too much adrenaline, too much cortisol, and I don't have to know how to regulate that fight or flight feeling, I'm going to get tired very soon. And that's where you're going to see that adrenaline drop. So there's conditioning, there's cardio, but there's also the psychology side and understanding that autonomic nervous system and your balance and how you prepare for fights. So it's another complicated issue. We go forever. I've been reading a lot more on Pavel and what he's doing, but I think the science of cardio has really evolved over the years. So people need to build that cardio base, that platform. I think high level sprints and burst moments are going to be one of the best things they can do. But I think one of the higher impacts, obviously have somebody train and set up a program, and we can go a long time on that. A bigger part of that cardio performance is understanding that autonomic balance and how crazy you are in reaction to the world. Because of that fight, you have to worry about it months leading up to it. You have to worry about it weeks leading up to it. You have to stay in the hotel for 3 or 4 nights. How are you dealing with that stress, that adrenaline response, and how do you enter the fight? What kind of mind state are you in?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when it comes to mental preparation for a fight, does it involve like in some kind of emotion? Because like sometimes you see these people getting too much emotionally involved with all the trash talking that's going on. So have you ever felt a real hatred for your opponent, or you always stay away from all those things and just focus on the process? Because everybody knows that's how they have to be, but sometimes we cannot control hating somebody because they are very annoying or irritating. Because if you fall into that trap, it's going to affect your performance. So how do you according to your experience, like how was that thing for you?
Yeah, no, I had to back off the emotions sometimes. I mean, some of the fights where I get most emotional and angry for would be your worst performance because of the way you respond. And I realized that I was way on that, overexcited sympathetic side. So I'd get the crazy Hulk strength, but you don't want crazy Hulk strength for 2 weeks, because you're gonna juice out your adrenal glands, you're gonna exhaust yourself, and you're not gonna have it when it comes to fight time, when it comes to go time. So you gotta figure out. For me, it was meditation. It was slowing down my autonomic nervous system, finding out how to put the brake on, how to activate that parasympathetic rest and digest. And that's still one of my biggest battles today, even as a normal human being, is how do you regulate that autonomic nervous system and your response to the world.
Perfect. Because Hickson Gracie himself said, like, in that era when people were like pushing too hard, like people were lifting hard, people were running hard for MMA, because they were treating the sport as any other athletic sport. But Hickson Gracie was completely the opposite, because he was kind of meditating, he was into breathing and all those stuff. So from what you say, it looks like this sport is more of an emotional control thing. It's more of your body control and all those stuff, more than just pushing hard like any other sport, because it involves a lot of thinking and technique. So though it may look from the outside perspective as a very brutal sport, it is very it's like an engineering, if you would ask me. So so you mean to say, like, you have to like go deep into yourself and have a good understanding of your emotional strengths and weaknesses, and that's how you look into the sport, right?
That's part of it. It's a marriage of both. Now, are you going to do it without the hard work, without the spar rounds? No, but to complement the spar rounds and your conditioning, you got to understand your mindset and your default. So I think, like I said, we like many topics, we can go all night, but it needs to be a marriage between what kind of hard cardio and conditioning, what are you doing, what types, what duration, how intense is it, how many days a week is it, and marry that to my autonomic response of how crazy am I, how much fight or flight do I have in my system, and how do I marry both of my craziness and my training. Am I recovering right? Am I training hard enough? How am I approaching this? So it is, like you said, more like the engineering, where it's a multivariate analysis where there's many factors that go into it and are going to vary from one person to the next. So you need to have that high intensity cardio. The durations, the times, and what you're doing is going to vary from one person to the next. The emotional side and understanding that, I think, is one of the most unrepresented in the sport. You're going to see more people that meditate and understand the neurobiology behind it. But I think it's one of the main missed factors in the sports is people not understanding mindsets and hormonal chemistry and approach to the sport.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to training, some people they are, I mean, they train too hard and they burn themselves out, and because they think like working extremely hard is the only way to succeed. But when it comes to MMA, you have to sometimes put a break on your training and kind of give more time to recover and do a lot of drills. So how would you define a perfect training for MMA? I mean, during the camp and off camp?
It's going to vary from each person to the next. During the
Okay.
camp, it's going to be more focused on that fight and your cardio conditioning. If you're outside of camp, it's usually going to be more of a focus, like where you would be right now and how am I building that strength? Where does my strength stand? But like I said, there's so much science out there and it kind of varies. You have some people that say never to lift weights. You have other people that only live by lifting heavy weights. So there's a lot of different opinions and variety of approaches. I would say when you're in the off season, focus a little bit more on your strength and your technique. When the fights come out, you got to focus more on your conditioning and being in the right spot for that fight, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So in UFC, like there are a lot of things that people wonder about from the outside because we don't know what's going on inside. So what is the exact formula for matchmaking, and how does it happen? Like, when they make fights, like, okay, this guy versus this guy, and how does it happen? How does it happen? And is there any mathematics behind the rankings? Because I think it is sometimes kind of illogical, because the guy who's been winning is behind and the guy that just lost is still in front of him. So how does it happen?
Yeah, no, I don't follow the rankings too much, but I know as far as the matchmaking, each different weight classes have matchmakers. I think there's 2 matchmakers for the UFC right now. So they basically pair up who they think are going to be good matchups and good skill sets, and they bring it to those individuals, ask them if they want to fight. If those 2 people want to fight, they sign the contract and they agree to fight on whatever date it may be. So as far as the algorithm or how they're doing it, I don't know too much about what the matchmakers are doing behind the scene. I just know they pick a couple fighters, and there's going to be different perspectives every time, but they take a couple fighters that they want to see in the cage and they make it happen. They send out contracts and they make it go.
So you still have you can still choose your fights, right? Like you can say, no, I don't want this guy, or you can ask for a preferred opponent, or
yeah, but that doesn't really happen. I mean, usually, unless you're a big name, you can pick your fights a little bit more. But when you're up and coming, you're going through the process, they pretty much give you a name. You can say no, but for the most part, I've taken almost every fight that's come my way. So the matchmaker gets people that he wants to set fights with. Sometimes people drop out. I've had another people drop out of fights and they get replacements. It's really up to the business and the organization. The fighter has some say in it, but for the most part, we're kind of beholden to the UFC and what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to confidence, of course, every fighter has to be confident, but it's not extremely. I mean, it's not something that is extremely possible, because when you are matched against a guy like Big Nog or Tim Kennedy, that are legends, it is very hard to be like extremely confident and be completely rid of self-doubts, because they are like specialists and known for their extreme knowledge in one particular aspect of the sport, like jiu-jitsu or boxing. So how do you tell yourself, or make yourself confident enough to believe that you're gonna win the fight, because that's the mindset that you have to go into the fight with, right?
Practice, visualization, and understanding, building that confidence over years. At the end of the day, it's just another human being stepping in the ring with you. As hard as that is, you got to tell yourself, and you got to have faith. You have to have confidence in your training, what you did to prepare for the fight. The people that are around you and who you want to be. If you don't go into the fight confident about your camp, the way that you're training, you're going to have some self-doubt and you're going to have some problems. So train appropriately, put in the work, make sure you have the coaches and the people around you, and visualize yourself being that victorious person is a good place to start.
Okay. So the last question is like, what's next for Trevor Smith, and how does he see his future in the sport?
Yeah, right now it's that was the last fight of my contract and they didn't renew, which is probably the best thing that could have happened right now. My body is run down. I've been able to, wrestle in 4 years, and you can see in my last fights, I was just trying to strike, and it's, it's such an old dog. Like, if I can't beat these guys now, I don't deserve to be here. So what's in the future for me right now is rehabilitating my back and some of the injuries that have been bothering me for 20 years. So if it takes a year and I can make a comeback and go beat people up at, 40, almost 41 years old, perfect. If I have to hang up the boots and walk away from the sport, like I said, I'll appreciate the education and everything that I took away from it. But right now I'm kind of in a pattern just of fixing my body, learning that knowledge. And as you can see, I've been helping around the gym. So I'm absorbing a ton of knowledge, just helping and training and being around everybody over at Arizona Combat Sports.
Perfect. That's a good way to close this interview. But before that, I would like to show something to you. Like, let me see if there's an option to, share screen, because this is the last thing that I want to show you. So this is my, once again. Okay. Can you see my screen?
I can.
You can, right?
Groin kicks, nice.
Yes, so this is my coach from India, the one right here. So he is extremely superhuman, and like, he is a phenomenon in himself. I mean, so the thing is, like, it is unbelievable what he does, and the conditioning that he has. He has absolutely like a bulletproof body that can withstand any amount of force. Heavyweights, light heavyweights, anybody from the UFC can come and punch him or kick him, and he is absolutely doesn't feel pain. So so this is a demo that he's showing where he's getting kicks from the top I think national level taekwondo players, and he is like reactionless. I'll show you.
Hey.
Move.
That's pretty, reminds me of Steven Seagal, cock puncher.
So because like I just wanted to like make a small tribute to my coach, so I just wanted to show that to a UFC fighter and make him proud. So
that's impressive, dude. The body's capable of amazing things, so it's impressive to take shots like that and to harden your body. You'll see it from some of the Thais, strengthen the body, legs with that kickboxing, Muay Thai, but that's impressive of your coach to be able to handle that. I'd be one kick, I'd probably be down on the ground with that.
Yeah, so it'll be great if you can say a hi or give a thumbs up to my coach before we wrap
Coach,
this up.
what's up, dog? Impressive. You had to teach me. I had to learn some things.
His name is Kibiraj.
Kibiraj?
Yes.
Kibiraj. Trevor, you have to come train with us someday. I look forward to maybe meeting you in person someday.
He is very interested in like coming to America and like sharing his knowledge to the UFC fighters, because he made conditioning as an art in itself. So like I would love to like make a demo, like a video demo or something with him, and he can really provide a lot of things for people like you who are like worried about getting injured and all this stuff, because he has an absolute bulletproof body. I can.
Send me some links. I'm curious at how he got to that stage where his body is so bulletproof. But
everybody is. Nobody knows this.
Goes to show you what the human body is capable of, because I'm sure he can teach someone else and share that knowledge that other people are capable of the same things that he's doing right now.
We need to study this guy, just like you, Romero.
There you go.
All right. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time, and happy 4th of July to you, brother.
Yeah. Thank you. Same to you. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Later. Bye.